The NFL scouting combine is about to kick off, and the 49ers are rumored to be making some moves in terms of their salary cap. We're going to get all of that and much more on tonight's Jack Hammer Show. Hey, everybody, this is Jack Hammer of the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. Welcome to the Monday show. And with me, normally I have Rob with me, but Rob's busy. He's, I think, still trying to dig himself out of the snow up in Portland. So I got my buddy here, Suneil. You had Suneil on last week on Thursday night. We're able to get him back on Monday night to chat some 49ers off-season topics in terms of, especially we're going to be looking at the salary cap and some moves the 49ers can make there, maybe a couple quarterbacks and some quarterback discussion, and then we'll talk about some Super Bowl windows as well. How you doing, Suneil?
Doing great. I love how every time, you need a replacement for Rob, you bring in me. Even like it's the bald head, the beard, it's so you still have the same aesthetic aside from you when it comes to your shows.
They're very similar. Yes, you're right. You're right. The only difference is you're here in California. He's up there. And every once in a while, you guys both have really good takes. Your takes on your Twitter sometimes are even better than the ones here in terms of like playing out. But, it's always fun. Real quick, before we get started, just want to shout out a few folks over in the comment section. We have Lucas Pesci, who says, "Hey, Jack and Suneil, good to have you on board, Lucas." We have East Coast Red and Gold Podcast says, "Hey, guys, how you doing?" And then Joey Lilly says, "What's up, Jack and Suneil? Good to have you on board, Joey." And let's kick it off. Let me see if I can figure out how to run this thing. 49ers contracts. It's an interesting topic. It's been something that's really been kicking off. It's been there kind of throughout the off season. Wrote something back at the beginning of the month regarding some potential names that the 49ers can do, and it's one of those things that's not going to go away until free agency kind of hits, and really until the season starts. They're going to be making some moves to free up cap space. Over the weekend, there was a few names that were brought up. Eric Armstead in particular. I believe Charvarius Ward, Fred Warner were all brought up as potential contract restructures that the 49ers are discussing those with already. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Obviously, there's always that kind of ballet dance that you have to do as far as balancing the cap, the future of the cap, and then also putting together the best roster that's possible to be competitive. And you look at this team that's had, really good success over the past 4 years, 3 NFC championship games, a Super Bowl appearance, and is like right there on the cusp. And, the philosophy, and we talked about this, last offseason, the philosophy for the 49ers has always been depth over premium talent because they do so good drafting and developing their own premium talent. So usually in free agency, they're not huge participators as far as going after those big names. But when you see a team that's been on the cusp so many times and been, just like a hair away from going all the way, obviously a quarterback plays a role in that, but it seems like the 49ers are at least putting themselves in a position to be a team that's a factor out there. And that's exciting. I mean, as a 49er fan, as a content creator for the 49ers, it's nice to see that this team is at least thinking about being aggressive because we've seen that, okay, we could go really, really far with developing guys and taking these 1-year prove it type guys. But how much better could this team be if they had, the big names and just kind of what the Eagles did or, what the Rams did a few years ago? Doing it smartly, though, as well, where the 49ers are still not overstretching themselves as far as financially.
Yeah, they have 6 guys who they can move money around, and they can open up about $60 million in cap space. if they go all the way with them. Like if you go on, it's easy. You go over to thecap.com. There's an interactive button that you can hit. It's super easy. So just kind of, I'm giving away all the secrets of the kingdom here. For those of you that don't already do it, you hit the restructure button, hit the go, and it tells you how much you save for each player through the restructure. And there's other ways that you can do it as well. You can do extensions and add years and those types of things. And you look at the way that the 49ers are set up right now, and I think that they're going to move some money around. They're not going into this thing as is. They're only $8 million over the cap right now. So they're going to be making some moves. Do I think they're going to go all in and do all 60 million of this and those type of things? No, I don't. And I think a lot of the money that they're going to be moving around is going to be to bring their own guys in. Right now, Colton McKivitz is a guy who, if you listen to all the pundits, everybody's saying it's, if Mike Munchie doesn't come back, it's Colton McKivitz is going to be the guy that looks to be the first guy back, right? But McKivitz isn't signed, so he's going to cost you, he's going to hit against that cap hit you have right now. Daniel Brunskill, what do you want to do there? Do you want to bring him back or not? And then there's some other guys on the defensive side. It kind of goes all, throughout the whole team. I do think they'll probably make one big splash signing. Other than that, I think they might make a big re-signing as well. Remember, they can. Last year they were worse off than they are now. They were minus $4 or $5 million in cap space at this point a year ago, and they were able to sign Deebo Samuel to one of the biggest contracts of the wide receivers in the NFL, and still be able to bring in a whole bunch of other guys and go out and get Charvarius Ward and give him a $42 million deal for 3 years, and so on. And one thing I'll say about the way the 49ers do their business, especially when they go out and sign those big deals, is they create them in a way they're usually able to get guys to agree to a deal that works within their cap space, but also one that allows them, especially for the guys that they like. Obviously, they're going to like the free agents that they're bringing in, but when they bring these guys in, or if they're re-signing their own guys, they structure it in a way that they can go back to those guys again down the road. So they get them kind of on the cheap up front, which might not seem cheap, but the overall numbers. Don't pay attention to the overall. When you see these contracts be signed, don't pay attention to them. But
just
you need to
guarantee.
pay attention. You got to just pay attention just the guarantee and the signing bonus, because those are the two things that impact the cap the most, is that guarantee and the signing bonus, especially the signing bonus, because that signing bonus gets spread out over the term. So like, let's say, it's a $42 million, but only 14 million of that is a signing bonus. That's great for the 49ers because that means they have a lot of money to restructure that player down the road. That's the case that they're in with Charvarius Ward now. So,
yeah, and I mean, when it comes to, I guess, strategy, I look at the types of players that you want to restructure, and maybe we could talk about that a little bit as far as what you feel like is the best strategy, right? And I think the fear that people have is a situation like D Ford, right, where you're on the hook for a big contract and the player is just not even on the field. And I think that one of the names and some of the things, some of the what comments right now, let's talk about like Arik Armstead, right? Mm-hmm. So Arik Armstead is a name that some people are questioning whether or not they should do anything to his contract. I think he has 2 years left. The cap hit of those 2 years is pretty significant. I think it's like 26 million and maybe 28 million, something like that. But for me, I look at a player like Arik Armstead, and do I feel like he can still be a productive player 3 years from now? Because that's really what I'm looking at as far as whether or not to restructure a contract. And to me, even though he is turning 30, I still think at 32, 33, he's still going to be a core piece to the 49ers. Now, is he going to be top level? Probably not. He's obviously going to be more on the downswing of his career, but he's a great locker room guy. He's a great leader on the team. He's invaluable to the community around. Obviously, he's won all of those awards for just being a stand-up guy and his community service and things like that. But he also is a productive player. And, injuries obviously play a role. He's not always available as much as he's been earlier in his career. But when he's on the field, he's still somebody who we're better when he's on the field than when he's not on the field. And I think those are the type of players that you take a shot on. And you mentioned on Twitter, Jack, and I wanted you to clarify a little bit. Why do you feel like, restructuring Arik Armstead, even if his cap number increases 3 years from now, why it won't affect the 49ers so much?
Well, if you look at where he is right now, I hope they leave Armstead's contract alone. He's getting up in age, and we can move on from him after this season if we want. So let's just take it, because if you look at Arik Armstead, you're going to you cut him after this season, you're saving $2 million against the cap. It's a $21.924 million cap hit. So you're saving $2 million. You're not really saying a whole lot there. Next year, it's about $11 million, right? Doesn't matter, because then they still have $6.712 million in dead cap for void years that comes up in 2025. So Arik Armstead's not going anywhere for the next couple of years. He's going to still be here in 2023. He's still going to be here in 2024 because of the way that cap structure is and all those types of things. He's not going anywhere. He's going to be a member of the 49ers. So what you could do is, right now, like I said, that dead cap hit year in 2025 is $6.7 million. If you take and you extend him, instead of doing a restructure, which is just pushing the money to the end of where his current deal is, that's not good. But you do an extension where you add a year, you get rid of those void years, or you maybe even add the void year down the road. What you can do is you can actually get him for a little bit longer period of time and have that dead cap space be the same. So, like, for example, if you take the way that I played around with it, if you say you could take $9 million out of his current base salary, convert that into signing bonus, add a year on to it, and then spread that thing out over one more year, you can actually have Arik Armstead on your around for this season, next season, and the season after that, before you get to that $6 million dead cap hit that you would have had anyway. I mean, basically what you're doing is you're just extending out that dead cap. You're going to have it at some point. That's always what happens anytime you restructure, guys. You're always kicking the can down the road. But you can also, Arik Armstead's a guy they like. Arik Armstead is one of the core members of the 49ers. He's not Javon Kinlaw. He's not, this is a guy that they expect to be around for a long time, which is why they gave him the money that they're giving him. Mm-hmm. So you can do an extension with him, change his money around a little bit, put a little bit more money in his pocket right now. He's not going to lose any money, that's for sure. And then at the end of the day, you're getting the services of the player for another year while not hurting yourself really against the dead cap.
And I mean, I think a lot of teams are also realizing that the cap is supposed to significantly increase when the new TV deal comes into play, right? And we're not talking 5, 10, 40, 30 million. We're talking significant increase, like $50-60 million increase in cap. So I think teams are willing to mess with contracts of guys that they feel like are going to be valuable to them in the next 2-3 years. I saw somebody say not to mess with CMC's contract. To me, that's a little bit interesting, because CMC, to me, and I think somebody said you could still find good value in running backs can often be found in. That, I think, is a myth that needs to be gone as far as value in running backs for this team. Like, yeah, you could find good value. You could find a Raheem Mostert. You could find an Elijah Mitchell. But they don't do what CMC has done to this offense, right? And I think that's kind of where I'm seeing maybe the 49ers mentality shift is they're realizing, okay, we have these systems, we have these structures in place where we can get talent, we could get the best out of guys that other teams can't get the best out of. But if we get a talented person and put them in that same system, that same scheme, it's head and shoulders above everybody else. So I know you mentioned earlier that you think they might do one splash signing. I think they might do a couple. And I think that they're going to add some talent to the defensive. I think they're going to get at least two guys Jack, and I think both of them are going to be on the defensive side. And I think there's going to be a defensive lineman and a safety. I think are the two positions that they're going to be aiming for in free agency. I've heard a little birdie tell me that that's kind of what the game plan is.
Well, I don't know who the birdie is, but whoever that bird is on the money in terms of my opinion. I've heard a lot of people talk about offensive line being the focus, especially right tackle because of the McGlinchey thing. I don't really see that. I mean, if you're gonna make a splash re-signing, I think the splash re-signing is Mike McGlinchey. If you're going to bring one of these guys back and give him a big money contract, it'd be him. But I don't think they're going to go that way. And part of the reason I don't think that's the case is because they've had a lot of success without having their best offensive lineman on the field. This goes along kind of with the article that I wrote for the Press Democrat today in terms of the Super Bowl window for the 49ers. As long as you have Kyle Shanahan around, as long as you have a quarterback that's healthy, I don't think it really matters who your right tackle is as long as he can breathe and he's serviceable. They'll be able to scheme around it. Tom Compton is a perfect example of that. He was not a good pass protector, good run blocker. They won a lot of games, almost went to the Super Bowl with him. That's probably why they're thinking of going with Colton McKivitz over McGlinchey as far as what that whole discussion point is around there. Mm-hmm. And so I think you're right. I think that it's going to be defensive line, somewhere along the defensive line and somewhere and safety. Those are the spots that are the biggest need, especially free safety. Free safety is the one spot that they don't have a long-term solution at. They have long-term solutions at the cornerback spot with Deommodore Lenoir, Sam Womack, Tarvarius Ward. They have a long-term solution at strong safety with Talanoa Hufanga. That other safety spot, they don't. They have, George Odom's a really good special teams player. He's a guy that can spot start for you if you need, but you don't necessarily want to go into the season with George Odom being your starting free safety. So when I look at this 49ers roster, the weak points or the points that I want to increase, I want to build up are free safety and defensive line. And if I can get the right tackle, I will. But if not, I'll be fine with it being Daniel Brunskill if I can bring him back, or Colton McKivitz, who I would expect to be able to bring back. I think you can go into this season and be just fine with that.
Yeah, and I mean, offensive line, usually you don't fix that through free agency. Most teams that have great offensive lines is because they drafted and developed, right? So I expect the 49ers to look for their right tackle of the future if they don't re-sign Mike McGlinchey, which I would say they probably don't. But I don't expect them to draft at 99 or whatever their first draft pick is in the third round. I would expect them to package a couple of those future third rounds and move up into the second round and get that right tackle of the future, because I do think that, if I'm the 49ers, I look at my track record over the last few drafts. I went and picked Aaron Banks. That looks like a home run as far as they have their new left guard of the future forever for the next 5 to 10 years. They got Spencer Burford, and he's showing signs that he's probably going to be the right guard there for some time. So I think they're more confident now in their abilities to pick and develop offensive linemen. So I would expect them to go out there in the second round. Seems to be, where, and get a guy. And I think there are going to be some guys available in that 40, in the 40s, if they can move up into that range and get one of these guys that could play right tackle. And even if, if McKivitz is the 1 year stopgap, and then they bring him in next year, but at least have somebody on the roster that they feel like can be the right tackle of the future. I more than expect them to do that this draft.
Yeah, I do. I agree that they're not going to stay with all these picks. They're going to move guys around. They're going to trade up in spots. They have a bunch of picks all starting in round 3. I could see them trading up out of the third round into the second round and picking up a guy. I had this conversation with Rohan on Friday. It's one of those things where whatever you want, whether it's a right tackle or a safety or a defensive lineman, whatever you feel you need to get, go up and you feel that guy's there in the second round, and you have some thirds that you want to use to do that. Maybe you're probably going to have to use something else as well, because I don't think a couple of thirds are going to get you that high. but you want to move up into the second round, go ahead and do it, especially if you have a target. As far as pigeonholing into one spot along the offense or defense, I don't necessarily think that's the smart way to go, especially at this point. But we'll see how that all plays out. Had a question over here too, and it's from Richard Willett. He says, won't we save in short term on Nick Bosa if they sign to a long-term contract, save on this year's salary cap? It all depends. His salary cap this year is going to be $17 million in that range because of the fifth-year option that he's on. But with Nick Bosa, it depends on what his deal is and how it's structured. Typically with the 49ers, deals like this do not get done until right before training camp or after training camp starts. So it's not like the 49ers are going to save a bunch of money by redoing Nick Bosa that's going to help them sign players this year. I just don't see that being the case because that's not the way that it usually gets done. And if there is that kind of a savings there, I would see, one of the things that another thing to remember as you look at this is the 49ers like to save about $3 to $4 million in salary cap space for the regular season. So if Bosa doesn't get done until, I could see them using up almost all of their cap space, get to the end of the offseason, re-sign, get this new contract extension done with Bosa to save them about $3 or $4 million against the cap this year. And it could even be something I think that could be similar to like the Jimmy Garoppolo deal is something I was thinking about this weekend. If you remember when Jimmy Garoppolo did his big extension, the 49ers pushed $35 million of his cap hit into that first year in 2018. What did that do? That meant in 2019, he was only going to count $17 million against the cap. So they were able to work around it, and make the money right, and give them some flexibility in future years. So we'll see where it works with Bosa. So it could give them a little bit of savings now, but I don't think there's going to be any kind of major savings. I just don't see the 49ers getting this done early because that's not the way that it usually happens with them.
Right. Although this is the one player that I think out of all of those players that got extensions is the most kind of no-brainer kind of extension, right? Like I think Debo, Fred Warner, they were, but as far as just like we know that this guy is going to make like probably reset the market type of thing. I think there was a little bit of discussion obviously with Debo, wide receiver, and Fred Warner was a third-round draft pick kind of thing. I think there would be some benefit to maybe getting this done quicker, even though I don't know if there's any other linemen that would compete with him to reset the market that are getting contracts this year. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, I think Bosa is going to be reset the market. He's going to be a big number against the cap, but he's proven he could stay healthy 2 seasons in a row and he's producing. So I expect them to get that done.
Well, it's going to get done. It's just the timing of it getting done. And I just don't see it happening before March 13th, March 15th, when free agency starts.
Sure. No, it's going to be in training camp like all their other ones.
Right.
But
and
go ahead.
Well, and I think that's kind of where this question is coming from, though. I think he's saying, can't they get this Nick Bosa deal done to create some salary cap space for him? I'm guessing here that he's asking that because that's money that they can use to sign other players. But I understand the thought process there, but I don't think that we're going to see it get done to where they're using his money for other people. You know what I'm saying?
And they don't need it, right? They have like Ward, Armstead, Warner, CMC, and they could even, if they want to do something with Trent, they could do that too. But I don't think they need it. They're going to be able to free up enough just off of the first 4 players that I mentioned, where they could still be extremely active in free agency.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they have that flexibility there to do that, and the Bosa re-signing isn't something that's going to help them in free agency. It's going to create some cap space for them, but it's not going to be a big free agent boost to them at all. And it's just interesting. I look at this and I think the 49ers when they one of the things, like I said it earlier, you kind of look at these restructures and how they can do it. And the 49ers can move some money around. Now, the Christian McCaffrey one that was questioned earlier, I do understand some of the concerns there because he is a running back. There are injury concerns. The good piece about a Christian McCaffrey deal is he has no bonus money right now. I should be careful, clarify that a little bit more. He has some bonus. But it's minimal. It's like in the hundreds of thousands of dollars right now. So when he got traded over here, all of that salary, the signing bonus and all that stuff stayed with Carolina. So the 49ers can make a move on Christian McCaffrey. They can take up, let's say they decide they want to do $10 million, right? Well, McCaffrey still has $4 million left on his current contract. Basically, they could take that $10 million and they're adding $2.5 million per year. You take the signing bonus divided by how long the term is. So if it's a 4-year deal, you spread out $2.5 million over, or $10 million over 4 years, $2.5 million a pop. Makes it pretty easy, palatable if, he only lasts a couple of years in San Francisco. He has to retire or whatever the situation is.
Yeah. And I mean, I like you said, I think the 49ers are in a very good situation. And, I kind of feel like they're going to make a couple of splashes, maybe not like huge, but they're going to solve, I think, a few more needs than they usually do through free agency this year.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out because they definitely could. A couple of those, those potential openings that they could be looking to fill. We don't know what's going to be happening at quarterback right now. And a big name just hit the market today. Carson Wentz, released by the Washington Commanders earlier today. What are your thoughts, Suneil? Is Carson Wentz somebody that could possibly end up in San Francisco? Would that make sense?
I mean, it would just be cool to have all the NDSU guys all in one quarterback room. Then they might even just get Coach Avery and just make him the quarterback's coach too, or bring him on as well. But I would say probably if I'm a betting man, I would probably say closer to no than closer to yes. And the reason for it, I just think Carson Wentz is going to be more of a natural fit with Frank Reich over in Carolina. I mean, they obviously have a relationship already, and if you can get him for, without having to give any assets up, we've already seen Frank Reich give up assets to get him when he was with the Colts. So I think it would just be smart to have some quarterback there that they feel like knows his system. And if they go with Matt Corral or Coral, I don't know how you pronounce it, but if they end up feeling like he's the guy, then cool. Like, there's a mentor there, backup type thing. Or if they don't feel like it, at least Frank has somebody who he believes in to at least run his offense if they don't do anything in the draft. So, yeah, I mean, I would probably most likely think he goes somewhere else, but it would be intriguing. I mean, I think that him and Trey obviously probably have some kind of relationship, and, that could be a good situation. It's just whether or not Carson still believes he's a starter in the league or not, right? We don't know what his mentality is about that.
Right, and that's where it makes it tricky for San Francisco, right? I don't think that there's any question that Kyle Shanahan would love to have Carson Wentz become a member of the 49ers, but the numbers have to make sense. As like he said, the player needs to make sense, the money needs to make sense, all those things need to make sense. With Carson Wentz, the money's probably not going to make sense there, but this is one of those guys who I'm not a big believer in Carson Wentz. We saw him have one good season in Philadelphia in 2017. Got injured. They went on, won the Super Bowl. They stuck with him. He failed there. He's bounced around all these different teams in the last few years. He definitely can do some things. And if he was a member of the 49ers, I would think that with the tutelage of Kyle Shanahan, he could probably, be okay. But like you just said, this is the guy who more than likely is going to want to try to be a starter somewhere in the league. Carolina doesn't have a quarterback. It makes a perfect sense to go back and play with his old coach, unless Frank Reich, says, you burned me once, I don't want to get burned again. That's the only question there.
Yeah, and I think the 49ers should stay away from quarterbacks that already are very injury prone. And obviously Carson Wentz has had a hard time staying healthy. Obviously the 49ers need reliable quarterbacks. They already do really, really well getting quarterbacks injured. So bringing somebody that already gets injured on his own maybe isn't the right fit for.
So you're saying that
us.
you're saying I think I just heard you say that Trey Lance is injury prone too because of his injuries that he's had. No, I'm giving you bad time. I'm giving you bad time. No, I'm kidding. He's Matt Ryan. How about Matt Ryan? This is another name that popped up in the chat. We had already discussed it, but how about Matt Ryan coming to San Francisco?
Yeah, I would also be a no on Matt Ryan. And the reason for that is I think that the backup quarterback position for the 49ers is actually extremely important. I want somebody that can win games. And I don't know if Matt Ryan is that player anymore, right? He obviously didn't do well over in Indianapolis. He'd be a great mentor, I think, for that quarterback room. Obviously, with Purdy and Trey Lance both being extremely young quarterbacks. However, I don't think Matt Ryan could give us much on the field, and I'm looking for a veteran that could actually give us something on the field. God forbid Trey Lance gets injured again. Obviously, we don't know how ready Brock Purdy is going to be come the beginning of the season and what he's going to look like immediately after that surgery. I want somebody that could play, and I just don't think Matt Ryan can play anymore.
Yeah, this is where it's interesting. I know we talked about Carson Wentz, and then we talked about here about Matt Ryan, and this is what is interesting to me. When you look at the 49ers, where they are right now from the quarterback landscape of the NFL, where they are within their own team. There's so much question marks at that spot. We know that Trey Lance is going to be here, or that's expected to be here because he's under contract for a couple more years. They gave up a bunch to bring him here. We know that they like what they had in
Purdy,
in Brock Purdy, and we don't know if he's going to be ready to go. When you look at the free agent market with quarterbacks, we know the names like Matt Ryan, we know the names like Carson Wentz, and there's Jacoby Brissett's out there, and there's a bunch of names out there, and you start to have these conversations on the show like this, and people get, they start to wonder, well, why are you talking about all these scrubs? Well, for me, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, what guy who has the potential of being a starting quarterback or has been a starting quarterback is going to want to come to San Francisco to be the number 3 quarterback? So that's where the Matt Ryan to San Francisco thing would be. I just don't think it happens.
Yeah, I mean, actually, when you put it in that term, I think that it would be actually more likely. I don't think Matt Ryan thinks that he has an opportunity as a starting quarterback anywhere. I think the fact that you got benched for the 3rd string quarterback with Indianapolis, like at that point, you kind of something's being told, for that. So I don't know if I don't know if the market for Matt Ryan, there's clamoring there. So I think that going to a situation where you're familiar with, which would be Kyle Shanahan's offense, on a team where you have a shot to play. And look, 3rd string quarterback for the 49ers doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to play. If you're going to be a 3rd stringer for any team, be that for the 49ers, because we just saw what third string can mean in the NFC Championship game, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm looking for guys that could be value on the field. I just don't know if Matt Ryan has that in him anymore. He didn't seem like he did with the Colts. I would much rather, a name that I would really look at is a guy like Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold is in that place where he knows that he's not a starter quite yet. Like, he needs to really rebuild his reputation and things like that. I think he would see value in teaming up with Kyle Shanahan, being the backup, and kind of if he gets the opportunity to play, quarterbacks look good under Kyle Shanahan, right? So that would be kind of that would be a name. And the other name for me would be, if Atlanta ends up going after Lamar or a quarterback somehow, Marcus Mariota might be another guy that could be a name that would be interesting, because I would like the 49ers to get a backup that has mobility so that the system doesn't need to change too much, whether it's Trey or the backup, and Mariota would kind of fit that mold as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. Mariota's one of them. As KW2421 points out here, this is a name I included as well in my list, was Andy Dalton.
I think Andy Dalton is too much of a different quarterback from Brock Purdy and Trey. He's he doesn't have the mobility of those two guys. It's a complete change if Andy Dalton comes in from, what Trey and Brock Purdy are giving. So I would think that they would look for somebody more with more mobility. And I think Andy Dalton is a player that a lot of teams are going to be looking at. So I don't know if he's going to, I think he still knows that he could go to whatever team he wants to because of that, what he's shown as a backup.
Yeah, he made $3 million last year with New Orleans. And the reason that I included Dalton in my list was when the 49ers had traded up to 3. If you remember, the name that was included that they were supposedly very high on, that according to the reports, Kyle Shanahan was upset that they missed on, was Andy Dalton. He really wanted to bring Andy Dalton in. He wasn't able to. I'm just telling you what the reports were. He never said this to us.
I remember
that was the report, and so that's why I bring that up. Again, Andy Dalton, does he want to come and be the number 3 though? Same thing with Taylor Heineke. I get like Lucas, he's a member of the toolbox. He just re-signed up. Thank you very much, Lucas. He says Taylor Heineke, he already said he wants to be a backup, and that would be great. I agree. I think Taylor Heineke is a really good fit for the 49ers. But all I'm saying is, are these guys willing to come, and they're not even going to be the backup. They're going to be 3. Are they willing to come to San Francisco and not dress on Sunday for the majority of the season? Because the only reason that they would dress is if Brock Purdy and Trey Lance are hurt, or one of them, right? So Brock, let's assume. Let's make some assumptions instead of making, let's make some assumptions. Let's make the assumption that Trey Lance doesn't get hurt this year and he's the starter, or and Brock Purdy isn't able to come back until week 1 or week 2, but when he comes back, he's fully healthy and he's going to be the backup. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Right. Which is a big if, right? Because we don't know what the situation with Brock Purdy is. And I don't know, when would I guess that would be a big major factor in what they decide, right? Would they know in time for free agency because that's interesting, because let's say they're not sure because the surgery goes, but they still need time like that. Is there a chance where they go into free agency and still not know the availability of Brock Purdy?
We got to remember, so free agency starts on the 13th. That's the open tampering period. It's the 13th. That's the Monday. The 15th is the Wednesday. That's the first day that they can actually sign at 1:00 Pacific time on the 15th. So we'll see where, when they pushed back Purdy's, surgery, all they said was that it was pushed back until early March. Well, March begins the day after tomorrow. So early March could be as early as this week, probably next week, right? So if it's next week, that puts the surgery ahead of time before the start of free agency. And if that's the case, they'll know what his timetable is. If he gets the inner brace method done, they'll know that it's going to be 6 months. That's a procedure that usually is 6 months or less. He's going to be throwing around 3 months. It would be the expectation. So if he gets the inner brace, that means it's probably going to be right around the start of the season. If they get in there and there's something worse and they have to do some other work, then they're going to know it's longer. So I think the 49ers' goal is to get this surgery done before the 13th so that they'll be able to then move accordingly with free agency.
Right. And it's a big risk too, because you don't really know how he comes back after that surgery either, right? So I still think that the 49ers are going to try to get a veteran guy that could play, because we know how important that quarterback room is for the 49ers. And I do expect them to draft somebody in the draft as well, in the, maybe 5th round, 6th round, that they could develop, because they need as much depth there as possible. Let's just put it that way.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. I think they're going to look to sign a quarterback in free agency so that they can have, I think they're going to go free agency and draft. I don't think they're going to bring in 2 free agents. I don't think they're going to bring in 2 draft picks. I do think they're going to bring in 2 guys though, because we know that we know regardless of what happens with the surgery for Brock Purdy, we know that he's going to miss time during training camp. We know he's going to miss OTAs. We know he's going to miss minicamp. They're not going to want to have just one quarterback there. They're not. I think they don't even want to just have two quarterbacks. I think they want to try to have three, because if you have three, that allows you to have two quarterbacks throwing and another quarterback working with the running backs, which is really what they like to do during practices anyway. So I think they're going to bring in two, and that's where, you get into some really interesting discussions, or could, when you start to look at the quarterbacks they can draft as well, because there's a few of them out there that I think make sense for them from round 5 on.
Yeah, I agree.
So we'll see what happens with that. Another thing, and you mentioned this to me, you want to talk about this one, and I've seen some other folks throw this around. Trade Javon Kinlaw. You were talking about a potential trade with Javon Kinlaw in terms of what they could get back. Why don't you go ahead and throw that out?
Yeah, and I can't take credit for this. Actually, I could give credit to the person that brought this up to me, because I thought it was a brilliant idea. And his name is For Us By Us on Twitter. So the interesting thing is, obviously Javon Kinlaw is not. I personally think it's obvious they're not going to pick up the 5th-year option on him. He hasn't been able to prove to stay available, and trading somebody that doesn't have that hasn't really shown much on the field, you're really not going to get that much for him, because what team would give up an asset necessarily for that? The thing that the 49ers have going for them is they've started kind of putting their guys out on other teams now, right? So now the Titans, the Texans, Miami, and the Jets all have an understanding of a guy like Javon Kinlaw, and maybe they would value him more than the rest of the league that doesn't know anything about him. So the trade that was brought up by For Us By Us is the Jets obviously have Saleh there, and they're always looking, to beef up their defensive line. They also have a player that they used the 1st-round draft pick on that had a lot of promise, but hasn't been able to stay healthy, and that's Mekhi Becton. And I think that would be a possibility to swap those two, just straight up trade, because Mekhi Becton plays right tackle. That's a position that the 49ers definitely could use. And obviously Javon Kinlaw being a tackle is a position that the Jets could use. So maybe that would be an opportunity where, both players could get a change of scenery. Both have had some issues with the team over, certain in different ways. I thought that was a great idea. I think that would be something where you would think that both teams would say yes to that, or could possibly say yes to that. And, if I'm the 49ers, I would make that call, because, that would be an area of need. And look, maybe you get something out of Becton, maybe you don't, but it would be a cheap way of maybe getting a guy who has a lot of upside, just can't stay healthy.
Yeah, that's one of the better ways of going about it. I've seen a lot of people talk about just really, just getting rid of him, just trade him. But this is one that actually makes sense, because both teams are getting things back that they could potentially use. The 49ers are going to need we've talked about it already. A right tackle is something that they need. Mekhi Becton is a right tackle that could step in and should understand quite a bit of Harbaugh's system, given who he's played under since he got drafted by the Jets. So from that standpoint, if you're able to trade him, Kinlaw, for Becton, if that's something that the Jets are willing to do, I would be behind that. That sounds very similar to the AJ Jenkins trade from, was it 94, when they traded him to Kansas City for some guy that, neither one of them did anything in the NFL. It was just a swap of two busts, So it makes sense. And I'm not saying that Kinlaw or Becton are busts, but it would make sense in that respect that both teams are getting something that helps them out while moving on a player that isn't working for them right now.
Right. And, for the 49ers, obviously it's a big if, because Becton hasn't been able to stay healthy at all. And obviously the 49ers aren't known for recuperating injury-prone people. But if he does become somebody and plays really, really well, you got a very young guy that could solve that position for a long time. So,
yeah, it would make sense. And Lucas is saying that Larry Krueger brought that up a week ago. So
awesome.
Maybe your guy got it from Larry. Maybe he's stealing Larry's material. Nah,
Shout out to
no,
Larry then.
that's right. Well, Larry's doing a great job over on his channel. But no, it's an interesting one because the Kinlaw thing is one thing I will say with all these people that are talking about getting off of Kinlaw, getting rid of him. I don't think he's going to be gone. I think that Kinlaw is somebody the 49ers see some value in. He's under contract with them. There's no benefit to them unless they get a player back. I don't think, unless it's a situation like this where it's an injured guy who's kind of also dealing with this stuff. I don't see him, that move being made. They're not going to just cut Javon Kinlaw because there's no salary cap benefit to the 49ers of doing that. Instead, I think they keep him as one of their guys and a rotational piece. In reality, I think the 49ers believe more in Javon Kinlaw than most of the 49ers fans do, whether that's right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a super chat over here I wanted to get to. Jaguayo came in earlier. He says, the question is, who can beat Mahomes, Trey Lance or Brock Purdy? This you're trying to get me in trouble here, Jaguayo, because, I look at this and I say, based on the way the 49ers were playing at the end of last season, if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt and they beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game, I wouldn't, going up against Patrick Mahomes is always going to be tough. But the way that offense is playing over the last 8 weeks with Brock Purdy, I could see the 49ers putting up 30-plus points on Kansas City the second time around. They put up 23 with Jimmy Garoppolo. Their defense just struggled that day.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that it's not quarterback versus quarterback. That's obviously the way that it gets played in the media. But can the 49ers defense, keep Mahomes to under 30? If they can, I think absolutely the 49ers can put up 30 points against Kansas City, especially with the addition of CMC, who wasn't in that game against Kansas City. That's why I really think that the defensive line and safety are probably going to be where the 49ers bulk up. I think we saw what the Eagles were able to do as far as the first half, right? They obviously couldn't contain Mahomes in the second half. I don't know what drug they gave Mahomes to make that ankle be the way that it was, because he was hobbling off the field in the first half, and come the second half, all of a sudden it looked like he had no ankle issues. But yeah, I mean, that game was really, really close. So I think, yeah, obviously Mahomes played amazing in that second half, and the whole Kansas City Chiefs did. But, I think both quarterbacks can put up enough points. It's whether or not the defense is going to be able to contain, Kelsey and Mahomes.
For me, the reason I say Purdy, just because we've seen him, we haven't seen it with Trey Lance. The most points we've seen him put up is 23. So could he keep pace with him? And I understand, I agree with you. The defense has to play a part in it. That's why when you look at this game, like the Super Bowl game, for example, you would have had to score, there was 14 points that you gave up because of a fumble by your quarterback that became a touchdown and a punt return that got taken to the 5. That's 14 points right there. So you really, you're closer to that 23. So, maybe Trey Lance, as long as your defense is playing healthy. We just haven't seen Trey Lance put up the numbers that we saw with Brock Purdy. But in Trey's defense, to be fair to Trey, he also hasn't played with Christian McCaffrey. So we don't know how.
And George Kittle, really.
well, he did play with them once, and
yeah.
But, and he played well in that game, against the Texans. That was a really good start for him. So, we don't know where he is right now because we haven't seen him play with all this group. All we can go off is, you're definitely guessing at it to say that he would be doing better. Because we've seen it with Brock Purdy. We just haven't seen it yet with Trey. We've seen some good things, but we haven't seen the consistency from him.
Right. And I think Lee Ving makes a great point. Like, it wasn't until they, until the Eagles really couldn't stop the run, that kind of is what helped out Patrick Mahomes. So that's why I think the 49ers for sure get a guy like Hargrave from the Eagles. I think that's like a target that they feel like they need to get, because he's somebody who could be a 3-down interior defensive lineman that could both rush the quarterback and stop the run, which is something that they wish Javon Kinlaw was, but clearly never was able to get to that point. So that's where I think the 49ers number one is interior defensive lineman that can do both. I would be surprised if they don't do whatever they can to get him.
Yeah, and then Ian says, trade Javon, not trade. 49ers run defense was bad in the Chiefs game. Yeah, they struggled, but the 49ers pass defense was really bad in that one too. They give up big chunks through the air that led to those touchdown runs that we remember. So it was more for the 49ers in that game. It was more of their pass defense, I think. Jaguayo, thank you very much for your super chat. That was a good one. It got us talking about something other than the topics that we already had in mind. So I appreciate that. Really quick before we jump off for tonight, Suneil, you got anything coming up on your channel?
Yeah, I mean, I do a weekly show with Rohan. We're still trying to figure out what day that's going to be, but definitely going to be going live with him. Talk shop with the 49ers. I am on with Jesse tomorrow night on Last Second Sports, right after his show with you. He goes on his channel, and I'm going to be on there with our normal Tuesday show. And then, try to get one more show in probably this week with someone. And yeah, that's about it.
There you go. And then also, so you guys know, it's So Real Sports Talk TV. It's in the description down below. So you can go ahead and find it. Get over there to Suneil's channel and make sure you're subscribed and watching his content over there. Check all that out because he does really good stuff. And Suneil, I thank you for joining me. We didn't have this planned until right before I went on, and I really appreciate you reaching out to me.
Absolutely, man. Anytime,
yeah.
Man.
Yeah, it's always fun. And everybody over in the that was watching this and in the comment section, thank you all very much as well. If you guys can just do me a favor of hitting the like button before you guys leave, hit that like button. That's very important for us. And then also, if you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button as well and the bell notification so you don't miss anything anytime we go live. You can also become a member of the channel like Lucas here with the $sign next to his name. So all those things are great. Hit those like buttons though. That's the biggest one. But keep it locked in here. The scouting combine is coming up, so there's going to be some information coming out of that. We'll be talking about a lot of different topics and a lot of different information as we go through these next couple of weeks as we get ready for the start of free agency. So keep it locked in here to Inside the 49ers with Jack Hammer. We appreciate y'all very much. Thank you all. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.